Hello and welcome to Indus News with me, Usman Low. Now, Israeli airstrikes kill 11 people and wound 4 others in Syria. The Israeli army confirmed it carried out attacks on Iranian targets and the Syrian military in response to 4 rockets fired at Israel a day ago. War monitors said 7 foreigners were among those killed. Damascus responded and said it thwarted the attack and shot down most of the missiles before they hit their targets. State media said the missiles were fired by Israeli jets from above the Golan Heights and Marj al-Ayun. Since the start of Syria's war, Israel has carried out hundreds of strikes on the country's territory against what it says are Iranian and Hezbollah targets. 10 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party have been killed in Turkish airstrikes during a counter-terrorist operation in northern Iraq. In a statement, Turkey's National Defense Ministry said it carried out military operations backed by air power in the Haftanin region. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapons caches and terrorist shelters. It said over 400 Kurdish militants were killed in northern Iraq over the past 4 months. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of around 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign inside Turkey. Now to Afghanistan, where 14 Afghan soldiers have been killed and 9 others wounded in an attack by the Taliban in Kunduz province. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said fighters attacked a military base in the area of the Imam Sahib district. The spokesperson said First Sergeant Altaf was among the dead. 9 others were wounded in the attack. He said the Taliban seized 3 US machine guns, an RPG, 4 M16 rifles and a sizable amount of military equipment. Local media confirmed the attack, but Afghan military officials and the Ministry of Defense have not commented on the ambush yet. Earlier, 2 US soldiers were killed in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. The Pentagon says the cause of the incident is being investigated. Well, Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu has called for an end to the blockade of 8 million people living under siege in occupied Kashmir. Speaking at an international conference in Istanbul, Çavuşoğlu said the Kashmir issue should be resolved through dialogue. Addressing the event, Azad Kashmir's President Sardar Masood Khan urged the world of an impending genocide in the victory. Khan said another Indo-Pak conflict can escalate into a nuclear war with unimaginable consequences. The conference urged India to restore normalcy in occupied Kashmir by ending human rights abuses. It also recommended international rights watchdogs to monitor the situation in the occupied valley. The Buddhist delegation visiting Pakistan has met Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and discussed religious harmony together. The 30-member delegation from South Korea arrived in Pakistan on a week-long visit on November the 16th. In the meeting, Qureshi told the delegation how tolerance towards other religions is in Islamic teachings. He said Pakistan is home to important relics of the ancient Gandhara civilization. Sharing details of its tourism policy, the foreign minister said Pakistan will provide an online visa service to promote religious tourism in the country. The Jogya Order delegation, led by Ven Wang Heng, thanked the foreign minister for taking steps to promote religious harmony and tourism in Pakistan. Well, 7 more Muslim litigants have become co-petitioners against Ayodhya verdict in the Indian Supreme Court. Earlier, the All India Muslim Personal Law Board announced it will be filing a review petition against the top court's verdict. Jamaat Ulema-e-Hind has already announced its decision to file a review petition after holding a meeting with the Muslim Law Board. Earlier, noted Indian historians and academics urged the Supreme Court to review its verdict on the case. On November the 9th, the Indian Supreme Court handed over the land where the Babri Mosque used to be over to Hindus in a controversial decision. Now, China has threatened to retaliate if US President Donald Trump signs the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act into law. Earlier, the US Senate passed legislation aimed at protecting human rights in Hong Kong amid ongoing pro-democracy protests. In a unanimous vote, the US Senate also passed a second bill that would ban the export of certain munitions to the Hong Kong police. Responding, China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang accused the US of interfering in China's internal affairs. Shuang said Washington is neglecting facts and applying double standards. Beijing pledged to employ strong countermeasures to safeguard its sovereignty and security. Well, for more on this, we're joined by our correspondent in Hong Kong, Patrick Fogg. Patrick, thank you for joining us here on Indus News. So tell me, Beijing has said it will retaliate, but what could these retaliatory steps be?
Well, that's not entirely clear at this point, but one of the other things that Geng Shuang said was that this goes against international law. So you wonder whether or not China might take this to some sort of international court. It's not clear what exactly that would achieve, though, because the Hong Kong Policy Act, remember, is something that was granted by the US. So presumably it is also Washington's prerogative to take these special trade and economic privileges that Hong Kong enjoys away. But all this talk of retaliation is probably a little bit too early at this point. Remember, this bill still needs to be sent back from the Senate to Congress for it to be reconciled, and then afterwards it still needs to be sent to Donald Trump to see whether or not he's prepared to sign it into law. The other thing that China may do, there was a sort of suggestion, a thinly veiled threat, if you like, when the Hong Kong government opposed the move by the US. It said that there were 85,000 US citizens living in Hong Kong and more than 1,300 businesses here. So when we talk about retaliation, there is a possibility, I suppose, that Hong Kong might make it more difficult for American businesses to operate in this city.
Patrick, we can't mention these two countries without mentioning the trade war between them. Can this act of the US Senate affect the outcome of trade negotiations between the USA and China?
Well, it certainly doesn't improve the situation, but, you know, matters were already bad with Donald Trump over the last few weeks. First of all, that no deal had been agreed upon to remove or roll back tariffs, and then saying that if a deal isn't done, that the US could impose further tariffs on Chinese imports. But, you know, the question really is whether or not the US is likely to use Hong Kong as a bargaining chip in its negotiations with China, and if it does, that is something that China will no doubt not take too lightly. And this is something that China is taking very seriously. It did summon a senior US diplomat to discuss this matter, so it certainly doesn't want the US to go down this road, and we can see by its actions already that it feels very, very strongly indeed about this.
Well, Patrick, let's say that they do take it as a bargaining chip. How far will it influence China's handling of Hong Kong?
It's a good question because, you know, to an extent, what's happened here may be seen as an embarrassment by Beijing. How it reacts isn't entirely clear. Beijing may be further angered by what's going on. And as we've seen and we've said over the past several weeks, there is very little room for compromise between the two sides. And there is an important date on the horizon. We've got the district council elections taking place, or slated to take place on Sunday here in Hong Kong. And already government officials in Hong Kong are suggesting that with some of the violence that we've seen over the last few days, that there is a possibility, or it reduces the chances of the elections going ahead. And the government here has already set conditions, if you like, for those elections to go ahead. It said that there can't be any violence, there can't be any vandalism, and there can't be any roadblocks. And it essentially wants a peaceful situation for that important vote to take place this Sunday.
Patrick, thank you. That was our correspondent in Hong Kong there, Patrick Fogg. Now, US President Donald Trump has threatened to slap higher tariffs on Chinese goods if Beijing doesn't agree to a trade deal. Trump made the remarks during a cabinet meeting in Washington. A spokesperson for the US Trade Representative says negotiators from both sides engage on a daily basis. Earlier, the US and China agreed to a Phase 1 trade deal in October. But Beijing and Washington have since sent mixed signals about how they'll move forward. The US and China have been stuck in a deadlocked trade talks for almost 2 years now. International financial institutions say the row has significantly slowed down the global economy. Well, China and Saudi Arabia have begun a 3-week joint naval exercise. The drills are being held at a Saudi naval base. China's state media says the joint drills are designed to build trust between the two sides to combat maritime terrorism and piracy. The joint exercise comes amid heightened tensions in the Gulf, with attacks on oil tankers and a major assault on Saudi energy facilities. Meanwhile, the number of US troops in Saudi Arabia will reach 3,000 in the coming weeks. In a letter to the House of Representatives, President Trump said the forces have been deployed to help the kingdom defend itself against Iran. Now, the US has announced it will provide Vietnam with another Coast Guard ship. The move will boost Hanoi's ability to patrol the South China Sea amid tensions with China. And those tensions that can only grow deeper. More in this report.
As if relations between Washington and Beijing aren't being tested enough by the protests in Hong Kong and their trade war, the Pentagon's decision to bolster Vietnam's fleet could deepen the growing chasm between US and China still further. Pentagon Chief Mark Esper announced the US would provide Vietnam with a new ship during his one-day visit to the country. Speaking in Hanoi, Esper hit out against Beijing, accusing it of unilaterally asserting illegitimate maritime claims. This comes after China told Vietnam not to complicate the South China Sea issue.
The core of the South China Sea issue is a territorial one caused by Vietnam and other countries directly involved in invading and occupying relevant islands of China's Nasha Islands. We hope Vietnam faces up to historical reality and abides by the high-level consensus reached by both countries, upholds the resolution of the dispute by dialogue and consultations, and avoids taking action that may complicate the issue and disturb the broader picture of peace and stability in the South China Sea and bilateral relations.
US Defense Secretary Mark Esper also met his Vietnamese counterpart Ngo Xuan Lek. Ties strengthening talks between the delegations ensued between both the delegations. This is Esper's final stop in his 6-day trip to Asia.
Now, the major contenders in the UK's upcoming elections have clashed in their first televised face-off, but the debate was mostly inconclusive as Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn proved unable to land a decisive blow against each other. More in this report.
Johnson said he would end national misery and accused Labour of offering only division and deadlock. Corbyn said he would negotiate a new deal with the European Union and then put it to a public vote.
Hello again, it's good to have you back. Now, electricity firms have cut off power to thousands of Australia's devastating bushfires opened up a new rage. Over 100 schools have also been closed in high-risk regions. Officials say the blaze have so far claimed 4 lives and destroyed about 2.5 million acres this month. They say the region will experience very difficult conditions in the next 24 hours. The fire service says this is the worst weather for fire as temperatures passed 42 degrees Celsius. Global media coverage of signs of climate change is painting a bleak picture for the future of the planet. Today, the Earth is plagued by problems ranging from rising temperatures to plastic waste and a major loss of biodiversity. But renowned British naturalist David Attenborough says there's still hope for a better future. More in this report.
93-year-old David Attenborough started working on zoology-themed shows on the BBC in the early 1950s. Since then, he's become a household name, delighting and fascinating audiences with his insight into the natural world. In recent years, he's devoted himself to raising awareness about the impending climate crisis.
People in all parts of society are aware of what's happening, and it's vile, it's horrid, it's something that we are clearly seeing inflicting on the natural world, having a dreadful effect. And there's something that they can do about it. So in a way, it's a bit of a litmus test to see whether, in fact, the population care about this sort of thing, and people do.
Attenborough says he's most encouraged by the increasing activism of young people.
But I think we are changing our habits. I think the world is waking up to what we've done to the planet, and young people, as we know, are demanding that things should be done about it, and governments are doing it.
Millions of young people flooded major cities across the world in September this year, demanding action against climate change. Activists also have new figures to rally around, such as 16-year-old Greta Thunberg from Sweden. Most importantly, the climate now has political significance, with Green parties making significant gains in this year's European elections.
Now, for decades, people have used art to share their vision of the world. In a similar vein, an art installation by a Mexican visual artist aims to create a shared experience with people in the United States. And now you too can share your experience with this artist in this report.
Artist Rafael Lozano Hema developed Bulletin, an interactive light and sound art installation. It's designed to strengthen the connection between El Paso in the United States and Ciudad Juarez in Mexico.
So that's my heartbeat going quite fast, and then let's hope that somebody in Mexico comes. I wonder, oh, someone's there. Someone's just touching the sensor, and that's their heartbeat.
Border tuner stations are located on each side of the border, featuring a microphone, a speaker, and a large wheel. Participants can talk to each other while large light cannons, synchronized with their voices, make the conversation visible. The project draws attention to coexistence and interdependence between the sister cities. Opened to the public on November 13th, the installation can be experienced until November the 24th.
Now, in business news, China has lowered its lending rate for the second time this week in an effort to shore up the economy in the face of the ongoing trade war with the United States. This follows the first cut in a short-term market in 4 years on Monday. The People's Bank of China slashed its 1-year and 5-year loan prime rate by 5 basis points. China's central bank also trimmed the 7-day reverse repurchase rate by 5 basis points. Central Bank Governor Yi Gang says Beijing will step up credit support and lower real lending rates. Asian stock markets traded lower today after US President Donald Trump threatened to raise tariffs on Chinese goods if a trade deal is not agreed. Now a look at the stock markets, and European stock markets are trading lower after US President Donald Trump threatened to raise tariffs on Chinese goods if they don't strike a deal. London's FTSE 100 has shed over 1% after Kingfisher shares dropped following a dip in its third quarter sales. Frankfurt's DAX is trading nearly 1% lower as tech company Wirecard saw its stock slide over 5.5%. The Paris CAC 40 has also lost over 0.5%. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the losses to close over 1% lower. Well, it's 23 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's the news, and that's all from me and the team here in Lahore for now. But for the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Bye-bye.